And now I'd like to turn your attention to EFI's CEO and 13th Secretary of Energy, Ernest Moniz.
Well, thank you, Alicia. And in fact, thanks to the entire comms team. You did remind me with your introduction that I do love CCS, but nevertheless, the Valentine's Day Association is a bit over the top, but that's okay. Let me also especially thank Jeff Brown and Steve Camello for and their team for the work that's gone into this report, and also the outstanding panelists who will take part in the discussion after the report presentation. We all know that the power sector has seen most of the investment given renewable scale up and the like, but yet we also know that we have to go well beyond the power sector and really look at industrial decarbonization and carbon dioxide removal and low carbon fuels and the like. And clearly CCS, we all know, certainly can be one of the tools that can help in all of those efforts. We will need innovation in multiple dimensions to get where we want to go in technology, policy, business models, public-private partnerships, if we are to reach commercial scale, hopefully at an accelerated pace, calling for more capital and certainly for changes in the financial model. We simply need, and this is really the focus today, to address the bankability or the investment quality issue for decarbonization solutions, because the existing pools of capital really are not yet fully engaged, shall we say, across the decarbonization spectrum. One such decarbonization solution that certainly has a bankability challenge is CCS, which we and many others view, again, as a very critical component of the overall portfolio of decarbonization solutions. Despite existing capabilities, CCS progress to date in the United States, I would have to say, has been a little bit disappointing in its pace. And a fundamental reason, of course, is that CO2 emissions are not capped or priced at the national level today, although we have clearly seen very, very strong policy support through the infrastructure and IRA legislation. And now the question is how to bring all of this together for accelerating CCS as a decarbonization solution. Much of the discussion will revolve around two of the kind of intrinsic features of CCS that is a challenge. One is application heterogeneity, and second, value chain complexity. Each new application of carbon capture really is essentially a first of a kind, and we're going to need to drive down risk and increase confidence for each commercial setting. And value chain complexity refers to the fact that obviously a successful CCS project involves capture, involves transport, deep underground injection, and ongoing monitoring. Activities which often call for different regulatory bodies at different parts of that CCS supply chain, if you like. So these challenges, again, will be a focus of what will be discussed later by Jeff Brown in terms of the report. And I would just say, to borrow from last week's State of the Union, basically it's about finishing the job. That, of course, is a great segue to our first speaker, Sally Benson, who will represent an administration view from OSTP and the Executive Office of the President. I think most of you know Sally, since she's a very familiar face in this arena of CCS, a great friend and colleague to us here at EFI. In fact, led the Stanford effort, collaborating with EFI in looking at CCS in California a few years ago. She was or is on leave or something. She could specify the pre-court professor and was co-director of the pre-court Institute for Energy at Stanford, and now she's deputy director for energy and chief strategist for the energy transition at OSTP in the Executive Office of the President. So Sally, please kick us off with your perspective on these issues. And thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, Secretary Moniz, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today. And thank you and congratulations to the entire team at EFI, not only for this work, but all of the work that you're doing to help meet our climate equity and economic competitiveness and national security goals. So to set the stage for today's event, I'd like to make 4 points. The first one is that CCS is a transformational technology, in particular because it allows rapid decarbonization, if deployed, of existing electricity, industrial processes, and infrastructure. The second point is that carbon capture and storage technology, well, there's still more work to do. It's very well established, and we have decades of experience with capturing, transporting, and pumping carbon dioxide underground. The third point I'd like to make is that meaningful engagement and support of local communities is essential for the sustainable scale-up of deployment. And we need to be trustworthy and trusted partners with local communities, or we're going to run into all kinds of roadblocks. And finally, as we heard, it's time to finish the job. It's time to get the job done. Both the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law really provide a historic opportunity that has never been present like in this moment. So I'd like to amplify a little more about all of these points. And again, going back to the first point, that carbon capture and storage is a transformational technology. So late last year, OSTP released a report, U.S. Innovation to Meet 2050 Climate Goals. We looked across a very large portfolio of R&D and innovation targets and evaluated them with regard to greenhouse gas reduction potential, environmental and equity benefits, economic competitiveness goals, jobs, and national security. And of this list, 12 technologies, including CCS, were identified as transformational technologies. Let me say a little bit more about that. So the Climate Policy Office and the State Department basically developed the document Long-Term Strategy, which provides scenarios for meeting our 2050 goals. So if you haven't seen that, I encourage you to take a look. And across all the scenarios, CCS is required, as is a significant amount of carbon dioxide removal. So to put this into perspective, anywhere from 0.5 to 1 gigaton of CCS and or carbon dioxide removal by 2050. Another study done by Princeton University, Net Zero America, had even higher estimates for the role of CCS and carbon dioxide removal, anywhere from 1 to 1.5 gigatons per year. So to put this in a broader perspective, that corresponds to about 10 to 30% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions today. So in addition to being an essential component, it also has a transformative potential because it's applicable to many sectors. So it's extra helpful. So of course, a zero emission power grid, industrial sources like cement, steel, chemical production, and of course, hydrogen production, which is going to be very important as a new energy carrier that allows us to decarbonize end uses. And of course, as we heard, in the long run, as we need to remove carbon dioxide directly from the atmosphere. So that's the first point. Second point is that carbon capture and storage technology is well established. We often hear, oh, it's experimental, we don't know, we don't have a track record. But the reality is that 3 decades ago, nearly 3 decades ago, the first purpose-built CCS project was established with the intention of avoiding putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. That project was done by Statoil at the time, offshore Norway, highly successful. It's still operating. More than 20 million tons of CO2 have been captured and stored. And lots of that information is publicly available. So in addition to that, in the meantime, 30 CCS facilities are keeping about 42 million tons of CO2 from being emitted into the atmosphere. So in addition to this on-the-ground experience, thousands of academic, national lab, and corporate research and scientist engineers have worked on figuring out how do we do this safely and how do we make sure that's effective so the carbon dioxide stays permanently trapped underground. And it's not just academics and so forth, but the Department of Energy supported for nearly 20 years 7 regional CCS partnerships that worked in close collaboration with state-level geological surveys, with other stakeholders to establish the potential for carbon dioxide capture and storage in their regions. And independent of that, the U.S. Geological Survey did an extensive effort to quantify the capacity to store CO2 across the country. And the U.S. EPA has already developed regulations for storing carbon dioxide underground. So, is there more work to do? As Secretary Moniz said, that we need to continue to de-risk these technologies as we apply them to different end uses. So there's certainly more work to do, but certainly we're ready to go today. So the third point is that meaningful engagement and support of local communities is essential. And it's time to put communities' interests front and center in the siting decisions. That we need to ensure that communities participate in environmental governance and that communities members are not exposed to unsafe air or water emissions. And make sure that communities benefit from the jobs and economic opportunities. And to make this work, we all need to be trustworthy and trusted partners in the effort to scale up CCS. And beyond just looking at the individual CCS project, which has been the tendency so far, we need to look at the entirety of the potential benefits of these projects, not just the CCS projects itself. So each one of these CCS creates benefits and opportunities as a clean energy industrial hub. So the electrification of industry, potential of hydrogen as a carbon-free source of energy, can create clean energy manufacturing centers in these same communities. So not only do they benefit from the CCS project, but the much broader benefits for this cluster of related activities. So the final point, it's time to finish the job, get the job done. Honestly, CCS has been on a roller coaster from the very early days. I participated in that roller coaster where we had high hopes and then expectations dashed as the policy landscape changed, many starts and stops. And unfortunately, I believe that it's led to a lack of confidence that we can get the job done. The reality is that if we look back to 2010, CCS has been growing at a pace of about 10% a year. But of course, that's not nearly half as fast as much. We need to double the pace of deployment, and we need to sustain that rate over several decades, which will get more and more challenging as the industry grows. But more importantly, the amount of warming depends on cumulative emissions. So the longer we wait to deploy CCS, the greater the climate damages are going to be. So we can't keep kicking the can down the road. We need to accelerate the projects that pencil out today, projects with community support, so we can create that track record of success that we need. And that's technical success, financial success, community success, and environmental success. And clearly, the federal government has a critical role to play, and I can assure you we're working on all fronts to make the CCS provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act successful. So we need to work together, identifying and breaking down the barriers to deployment, and the excellent work we'll hear about today does exactly that. We need to build bridges to communities, and we need to make sure that CCS is deployed safely and effectively. So I look forward to hearing more about the details of the report, and thank you very much for inviting me to participate today.
Well, thank you, Sally. Sally, may I just ask you one follow-up on the community issue? Do you have any views in terms of what might be additional environmental impacts like on criteria pollutants? And do you have views on the potential social equity benefits in terms of workforces translating their skills from today's energy incumbents to CCS?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, certainly. As CCS was developed, the focus was largely on air emissions, reducing CO2 emissions. Of course, we need to think about criteria pollutants. The impact of CCS on criteria pollutants depends on the end use to which it's applied. So there's not a single answer to that question. Certainly, in many cases, there are big benefits as you put on equipment to scrub out particulates and sulfur. In other cases, it may be more neutral with respect to criteria pollutants. There are also important issues that we need to consider with regard to designing facilities that do not emit aerosols associated with the solvents themselves. These are solvable problems, but we need to pay attention to them so that, again, we do the job right. We don't just get the job done, but we do it right. In terms of benefits to communities, clearly, energy communities with existing facilities really stand to gain by the installation of these facilities. And I'm very excited about the idea. Again, it's not just the CCS project, but if you've got a clean, firm supply of electricity that's decarbonized, that's a perfect source for industrial processing where you can count on that reliability you need. And similarly, if you use CCS on steam methane reforming facilities, you can create clean hydrogen. Again, that can whole economic cluster both for heavy-duty transport, industrial processing, and so forth. Really creates a lot of benefits. And I think if we can think about clustering in those in a way that really do deliver those benefits while being clean, that there are big benefits for communities.
Well, thanks, Sally. It's very encouraging to have someone with your depth of knowledge in your position as chief strategist for the energy transition, and we look forward to working with you again going forward.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sally. Yeah. With that, we're going to now turn over to Jeff Brown, who has joined us at the EFI Foundation last year and has been leader of this project along with Steve Camello. And Jeff's going to give us a summary of the findings and recommendations in the report. Jeff, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Ernie. Well, look, thanks to Ernie and Sally for kicking us off this morning. Also,